So I've been moving to a new country every single month for almost 3 years now, and everybody always asks me why. Why am I doing this? And I think that's because it was really confusing for the people who knew me at the time that I made this jump. The timing was confusing. I had recently graduated college. I had a great job that was paying me real money. My girlfriend, now wife, and I at the time had a great apartment in Chicago. Everything was going according to plan, but there is a reason why. And I think it goes back to a series of problems that we identified. Have you ever heard of the FIRE movement? It's an acronym that stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it's this financial movement or goal that some people were chasing, and we were kind of obsessed with at the time, that basically you save a bunch of money early on in your life, like as much as you possibly can, and you're able to retire maybe in your 30s, maybe in your 40s, but the point is you get to retire earlier than most people could ever dream of. And that was really appealing to us, and that's what we were chasing. And the good news was it was working. We were on track. Everything was going according to plan. But there was a problem. We were so sucked into the US work culture that we just didn't have any time or energy for anything. I mean, we didn't have time for family or friends. We hardly had time or energy to take care of one another and even ourselves. And we looked at this and we said, hey, even if we're able to meet our crazy financial goals and retire in 15 years, can we realistically do this for the next 15 years? And the answer for both of us was no, no shot. And I guess then we pivoted and asked ourselves, well, what are we even chasing with the retiring early? What is life going to look like when we retire? What is it that we actually want to do? What would we do if money was no obstacle? And that answer was a little bit easier. It led to another problem, which we'll get to, but it was a little bit easier in that we knew we wanted to travel. But why travel? Why would we want to travel when we're retired? What are we actually looking to get out of that? See, the easy answer is, of course, we want to have those fun experiences, create those lasting memories, and be exposed to other cultures. But there's some deeper things that I think we wanted to explore. You see, growing up in the US, you're kind of conditioned and always told that the US is the best. The US is the gold standard, and no other country has anything that can compete with the US. And you're kind of discouraged, and it's viewed as like unpatriotic to ever claim or even question if another country or place or people have figured out anything better. And at the same time, growing up in the US, if you're observing things around you, it's pretty clear that not everything is perfect, right? We see a rise in gun violence throughout my lifetime that no other country really seems to deal with. We see, from a food standpoint, the amount of processed food seems kind of crazy, a healthcare system that seems broken, an education system that doesn't seem to be operating in the way that it should, and just this overall culture of sacrificing everything for the almighty dollar. And it's hard not to ask yourself, well, hey, do other places have these same issues? Are the systemic issues that I'm seeing in the US, does that exist everywhere? Is there truth to the statement of the US is the best and I shouldn't explore elsewhere? And those were the questions that we said, hey, during retirement, that's what we want to figure out. We want to go explore and kind of answer those questions for ourselves. But then you run into another problem of, wait, what if we don't end up reaching our financial goals? What if we're not able to retire early? What if we're not ever able to go and travel and find these answers for ourselves? And what could stop us from doing that? Like health, are we going to be healthy enough to travel? Are we going to have the money to travel? Are borders going to be open 20, 30 years down the road like they are today that give us the opportunity to travel? All of these variables that are outside of our control, we don't know that what we actually want to do is even going to be a possibility for us down the road. And maybe a bigger problem is, well, hold on, some of these issues that we're talking about, they seem to be value driven. And if we're really exploring, does the US align with our values, or is there a place that is maybe a better cultural fit for what we value? shouldn't we figure that out before we spend most of our lives living in the US? Shouldn't we learn that early on before setting roots? Because would we just get caught up at the US culture, more ingrained in that, more ingrained in the keeping up with the Joneses and setting roots in a place that would be harder and harder to ever separate from? And I really just felt like I needed these questions answered before I set roots and really start a life somewhere, especially if Sarah and I are thinking about starting a family. I mean, it just kind of feels irresponsible not to know what's out there before committing the one life that we get to the one thing we know. So I think that played a major role as well. And we realized maybe we're thinking about this backwards, but how do we solve for that? Seriously, how do you make sure you get to live your retirement dream? How do you make sure that you don't waste your youngest and healthiest years of your life, doing something you don't necessarily want to do in hopes that you get to live that dream? What about all those, 20 years in between where there are going to be things that you can't control that might prevent you from ever getting to live that dream? How do you eliminate that risk? And of course, like in a perfect world, it's, well, what if we could get some of those answers now? What if we could start traveling now? And, we laughed at it, but then we said, well, hang on. Can we? Could we just start traveling and living our retirement dream now without really being retired? And for some crazy reason, within a matter of a couple months, we decided to make the craziest jump we've ever made, and we quit our jobs. We sold everything that we had. We booked a one-way ticket to Croatia, and we've been moving to a new country every single month for the last, like I said, almost 3 years. But there's also some bad news. And the bad news is that I've been doing this for almost 3 years now, and I probably have more questions now than when I originally started, and I'm still seeking out some of the answers to some of those original questions. And there's good news in a minute, but I also think it's important to note that I am well aware and recognize that me having had the opportunity to grow up in the US has afforded me the privilege of getting to live this crazy lifestyle. So I am not in any way, shape, or form down on the US, and I'm not opposed to ever moving back there. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities that the US have afforded me. But the good news is I'm not moving back anytime soon. I plan to continue this lifestyle because there's so many other questions that I have now, and there's so many questions that you probably have, like, how do I afford all this? How am I making money? What are the logistics that go into this lifestyle? What have I learned? How have I changed? What's the plan? And all of that will be answered on this channel. That's what this channel is for. And of course, I'm going to bring you helpful travel tips along the way. So I'm glad you're here, and welcome abroad.